All right, Rabbi say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning share. To thank our annual TALMUD TORAH sponsor for Tafshin Pei, the Tilson Mishpacha, for dedicating all the Shirman Drushos this year as a zechus for besuros, tovos, Am Yisroel. TALMUD TORAH sponsors for the month of Adler, Teri and Steve Czinn, in loving memory of Teri's father, Dr. Kahn, Tzvi Hersch ben Yosef HaKohen, the Ziv, Lavine and Behrman family's memory of Mr. Willian Ziv, Zev Shmuel ben Yisrael. Our week of learning sponsors, Nathan and Beth Adler, in memory of Judy Goldman, Yehudis, Esther, Beth, Elozer, and our Daf Yomi sponsors for today, Matt and Diane Marks, in memory of Matt's father, Charles Marks, Kalman ben Mordechai, We hope that in the merit of our TALMUD TORAH, all of the neshamas Lavine Aliyah, the families in Nechama, all those who need a refuah should have one together with Kol Chali Yisrael. Kadosh Baruch Hu should in Yahrzeit Hashem bring home all of our hostages, and our holy soldiers should be successful. B'chol Maaseh Yedehem. Well, with that, let us begin. And a special welcome back and a refuah shleim with the David Schwartz. Baruch haba, Baruch haba. Kadosh Baruch Hu Shem Yahrzeit Hashem continue to give you refuah in Yahrzeit Hashem, and we missed you. We missed you, but it's great to have you back. As well say with that, let us begin. We have a lot to do today, Baruch Hashem. Again, we'll say, by the way, this is it till we get to the end, right? This is Baruch Hashem. This is beautiful, beautiful Gemara after Gemara. I got it, a story, lesson, messages, everything rolled into one. We're going to have a little bit of halacha as well. So with that, let us begin. Today's daf is Tzadik Vav 96. We are picking up in Yahrzeit Hashem on the bottom of Tzadik Hey Amud Beis 95b. And also, he's not here today, but we have to wish a mazel tov to our beloved Chaver and our Daf Yomi member, Rabbi Avron Elbaum, our Gabbai, our Daf Yomi pillar. I'm pointing over here like longingly, like you would normally be sitting right over there. Who's marrying off his daughter today, Baruch Hashem, B'shah Tov, Mitzlachos, Mazel Tov to the Elbaum Mishpacha. Incredible. Rabbi says, let's begin. So we are picking up on the bottom of today's Tzadik Vav 96. We are picking up on Tzadik Amud Beis 95b, and we left off 4 lines up from the bottom. I'm Rabbi Avo. Rabbi Avo says as follows. Ilmoli mikra kosav v'yav shalom ro. Had the pasuk not said it, you couldn't have said it yourself. V'chsiv bayomahu yigalach Hashem betar hashira berinar b'melech ashur asarosh usar raglayim v'gam azokin tispa. So we'll say, so the Gemara very close to the pasuk, and the pasuk says, on that day, like Kiviyachol, the Ribono Shel Olam will give a haircut. He'll cut the beard, he'll cut the hair of the king of Ashur. So what is this talking about? So the Gemara says, Asa kucha brichel, ve'idni leke gavra saba. So we'll say, so remember again, Sanhedrin has been defeated. We saw that story already. Right? He suffered a humiliating defeat, not even at the hands of Chizkiyahu. Remember again, he suffered a humiliating defeat at the hands of HaKohen Baruch Hu, just this ridiculous event that wiped out his army overnight. He now has to go back home and face his constituents. So the Ribono Shel Olam appears to him as an old man. Ve'idni leke gavra saba. Amalei, ki azos lekabi malchus mizrach. So the old man, right, comes to Sanhedrin and says, Sanhedrin, when you have to go back home and you have to talk to all the kings, remember again, Sanhedrin raised a huge army. Those were armies from neighboring kingdoms as well. So when you have to go back home and face all of those kings whose sons you convinced to come out and do battle with you, and now those sons are dead, what are you going to say to them? What are you going to say to them? So Sanhedrin says, you know what? I'm afraid. I don't know. I too have that fear about what am I going to say. So Sanhedrin says to the old man, what should I do? They will say, of course, you know what's so interesting about this is, remember again, fascinating how things change. Sanhedrin was this general in charge of everyone, confident. And now what happens? He's asking an old guy he just met, right? He has no idea who this person is. And he's asking this old man for advice. What should I do? Amrlei. So ultimately, again, so this is incredible. So the old man says to Sanhedrin, listen to this. Amrlei, zil v'shani nafshach. You should really change. Rashi says over in shi nafshach, shana atzmecha kedesh lo yakirucha. So it's fascinating. So the old man says to Sanhedrin, if you know what you should do, you should change yourself enough that nobody recognizes you. They say when you go home, no one's going to bother you. All right, b'mai ishni. So how should I change? Amrlei zil aisili mispera va'azagach. Go get a pair of scissors. I'll give you a haircut. We'll change your appearance a little bit. I will say, I just want to point out before we go on. What a profound Gemara. And this is the timing of this is incredible because it's almost Elul. And we really have to how it is so important to be able to get into the mindset of change. So look what happens over here. So Sanhedrin is in trouble. What does Sanhedrin realize? Sanhedrin realizes the way I'm living right now, right, what I'm doing is not the way I need to be focusing. I'm going to say, we all have those epiphanical moments, right, when I realize that what I'm doing, this is not the way it should be. It's just not the way it should be. I know that I could be more. So Sanhedrin has that epiphanical moment. And he says, right, so he goes to the old man. The old man says, you should change yourself. Change. You can change whatever you want about yourself whenever you want. You should change. And both say, what so often happens when it comes to change? Sanhedrin says, what, that's a great idea. It's a great idea. And how should I change? Oh, take a haircut. We'll say, sometimes in life, we have these moments of clarity where I recognize that I need to change. And then instead of affecting real change, we affect cosmetic change. It's cosmetic change. Oh, I really should change. You're right, that hairstyle really should change a little bit, right? It's the wrong mushal for me, but you understand, right? In other words, we just, instead of focusing on real change, cathartic change, personalistic change, we just content ourselves with cosmetic change. And that moment that could have been so transformative simply goes by with little or nothing concrete to show for it. Such a metaphor. In any event, and I will say, by that, I just want to point out, that's what's happening with Sanhedrin over here, so we're going to see this come out a little bit more. Sanhedrin suffers this humiliating defeat. I will say, there's nothing that gets you to think about change more in life than humiliating defeat. We've all had it, we've all experienced it, and those are moments where often you're most open to anything and everything. Okay, so get a haircut. So Sanhedrin says to the old man, where am I supposed to get a pair of scissors from? Allahu beisa va'isi. So what happens? So he says to Sanhedrin, look, there's a house over there. Go in there, get a pair of scissors from there. So as Sanhedrin goes in, he finds scissors. Asu malach esharis ve'idmi lekegavri. So it says this is a tremendous setup over here. Malachim come into that house and they appear like people. V'havu katachni kashiyaisa. They were grinding kashiyaisa. Rashi says over here, garine tmorim. It was date seeds. So they were grinding this up. So Amrle havalu mispara. So Sanhedrin says, Chevra, can I borrow a pair of scissors? Amrle techon chad geruya de kashiyaisa v'nitelacha. So they said, Sanhedrin, there's no such thing in life as free scissors, right? So you want scissors? Grind the geruya of date pits with us. Okay, work a little bit and he'll give you these scissors. Tachan chad geruya kashiyaisa v'lavel misparta. So Sanhedrin ground up the date pits, right? And they gave him, this is Yosef, another tremendous Moshe skill. This is Sanhedrin, right? Commander of the largest army in the civilized world at the time. And I will say, it's incredible, desperation. Failure humbles you, and desperation. When a person is desperate, you do whatever you have to do to get the job done. Isn't that incredible? When we're riding high, so there are certain things that are beneath me that I'm not going to do. But when I'm in trouble, we recognize you do whatever you have to do in order to get the job done. So Sanhedrin now is afraid of facing the people back home, right? He needs to get a haircut. He needs a pair of scissors. He's got to grind date pits. You're going to do what you got to do in order to get the job done. So good. So by the time Sanhedrin got back with the scissors, so the old man already became dark. Now the old man says, and the old man is Chosh Baruch, he says, listen, I can't give a haircut in the dark. So bring me a fire. So the Gemara says, so azal aisi nura bahadi de kanafach le atli be nura bedikine. So what happened? Azal gaza the reisha dikine. So as Sanhedrin was bringing back the lantern, the fire, his beard caught fire a little bit, and it turned out it ended up singeing his beard. So ultimately, again, the old man ends up cutting off his beard and his hair. Amru hainu dichsiv vegames hazakon tispeh. This is what people say. So this we'll say this apparently birthed the famous adage. Rashi says over if you go ahead and you set fire to an Aramean and he likes it, You could also go ahead and singe his beard, and it will be an unending source of entertainment. Okay? You do with that what you want, right? And I don't have anything on it. Right? So nice, again, the idea over here, we'll say, it's talking about also, I think the takeaway from this entire Gemara, in a serious sense, is life could change so dramatically. And we experience this in different ways. That a person could be on the top of the world one moment and literally, again, the bottom of the bottom the next. And what's so profoundly important, and again, to Sanheriv's, I think to Sanheriv's credit a little bit, you have to be able to roll with it. You have to be able to pivot. You have to be able to know what to do when you're the commander of the army, and you have to know what to do when you're a humble, defeated individual. And if you notice again, some man suggested Sanheriv, get a haircut, Sanheriv gets a haircut, whatever you need to do. But listen, there are some people in life, when life doesn't go their way, and the plan doesn't materialize, they simply get paralyzed. They don't know what to do. They're stuck. They can't get over the fact that life did not materialize the way that I wanted it, and they don't understand the power of the pivot. And I think you see this Rav Sancheriv, to his credit. You don't become the commander of the largest army in the civilized world by just being a regular guy. Sancheriv must have had ridiculous kohos. Part of those kohos is the power of the pivot. You gotta be able to lean into whatever life throws your way and recognize that whatever it is, figure it out. Gemara goes weiter. Azal ashkach rafa mitivusa dinoach. We'll say is incredible. So Sancheriv is journeying home. As he's journeying home, what does he find? He's supposed to say these incredible stories. He finds a plank from Noach's teva. From Noach's teva. Now we'll say, by the way, geographically we know that, remember again, the teva kind of, what's the word? Landed. What is it? Docked. I don't know if it docked per se. Grounded. But isn't this like a lashon for like when it washes ashore? Whatever. Docked, grounded. It stopped, right? On Harei Ararat, right? Which actually, by the way, interestingly enough, geographically works along this idea as he's heading back to Ashur. See, he finds a plank from Noach's table. You can't. This is incredible. Like, can you imagine? Like again, just to understand, this is quite a day for Sancheriv. He ran into HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we'll say, but I just want to point out, the Ribono Shel Olam appeared to Sancheriv. Do you understand what that means? Do you understand what that means? Because again, Sancheriv, interestingly enough, remember, we'll say this goes back to what we saw last week. Sancheriv was on a divine mission. His mistake was that he went after Yerushalayim. That was his mistake. That was out of bounds for him. He defied the divine mandate. He was a shaliach of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but he overstepped. You don't become a shaliach of Hashem without possessing some type of personalistic greatness. See, met HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He met the Ribono Shel Olam. Next, he finds a plank from Noach's teva. Amar. So ashkach dapa mitivusa de Noach. Amar hainu eloka rabba deshizve leNoach mitifuna. And he said, this is the great God who saved Noach from the flood. Amar i'ezal gavra matzlach makrav lehu letrain benoi. So Sancheriv says, you know what, if I go and I'm successful, meaning in other words, if I go and ultimately I'm able to survive at home, reclaim my former greatness, I will offer up my two sons as a sacrifice to the God of Noach. To the God of Noach. Now, interesting to say, it seems to be that he's ascribing some type of divine powers to the actual plank itself. In any event, he pledges to go ahead and offer up his two sons. Well, as one can imagine, Shamu Benoi, his sons heard about this and weren't overly excited about this promise, and therefore Vikatluhu, they killed him. Sancheriv is assassinated by his own sons. V'aynu dichsev v'yihu mishtachave beis nasruch elokov v'adar melech v'shar atzar banav hikol b'cherev. Sancheriv is worshiping his deity, and as he's worshiping his avodah zarah, his own sons go ahead and kill him. I will say, by the way, it's also interesting, when you think about this imagery, Sancheriv is trying to hold on to a plank from Noach's teva. It's very reminiscent. The Medrash tells us who else held on to Noach's teva and was saved? Og. The Medrash says that Og Melech HaBashan, right, was held on to the teva and was saved. And I will say, in times of distress, everyone's trying to hold on to something. The issue is in life, you have to make sure that you're holding on to the right thing. You see, even here, Sancheriv is always, the tragedy of Sancheriv, you don't have to feel bad for Sancheriv. The tragedy of his condition is, so often he's so close to turning things around, but just never manages it to get together. In other words, this idea that he finds the plank of the teva, and he's like, you know what? The Ribbon Shalom, you could be my life preserver. Like, I could hold on to you and turn this around. And we're going to see this comes through a little bit, but yet, then he brings up offering his sons. It's always as if he misses it, just by a few steps. So close to being able to affect that real change, to be able to turn things around, but always missing it by not being able to put the pieces directly together. Incredible. So the pasuk says, I will say, switching gears here for just a moment. This is Avram Avinu. Now, this is in the story in Bereshis. Remember again, there was the battle of the four kings against the five. The four defeat the five. Avram goes to war against the four. So the pasuk says, "Vayichalek aleim laila, hu va'avadav vayakem." Literally, again, the literal translation is they split the night. Avram and his servants, and they smote the four kings. Am Rabbi Yochanan. There was actually an angel who was helping Avram Avinu to fight this battle, and the angel's name was Laila. Shneimar v'halayla amar horagever. Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha says sha'asi imo maisa Laila. That ultimately, again, what it means is that this Rashi points out the stars, right? The stars actually fought on behalf of Avram Avinu. They actually did battle, not on behalf of Avram. They fought together alongside Avram. Shneimar min shamayim nilchamu hakochavim mimsilasam nimcha im sisra. Amrei shlagish tava nafcha midavar nafcha. The words of the nafcha of the blacksmith, Rabbi Yitzchak, that's Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, are better than the words of Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan is known in Shas sometimes as bar nafcha. So the words of the blacksmith are better than the words of the son of the blacksmith. Okay, so ultimately, you like Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish chooses Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha's idea. The stars went to war with Avram Avinu against the four kings. I'll also just point out over here how we've mentioned this many times throughout our journeys in Shas. Why does the Gemara need to call Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha? Okay, so simple answer is because there's more than one Rabbi Yitzchak. I will say the deeper message is, a lot of times in life we think that if we have a profession, that's my patur from becoming an outstanding Talmud Chacham, a Gadol Batorah. So what does the Gemara do? Every once in a while the Gemara says, by the way, you could be a blacksmith and you could be a Gadol Batorah. You could be a blacksmith and earn yourself a place on the page of Shas. We all have to work for a living. That's just the way that it is. But lest you think that your career exempts you from achieving excellence in Torah, not true. We have an obligation to be excellent in our professions, and we have an equal obligation, if not a greater obligation, to be excellent in Torah as well. There is no telling what we could become, even though we all have day jobs. Vayirdav ad Dan. So let's remember again, the pasuk says Avram Avinu pursued them, the four kings, up until Dan. So what happened in Dan? Ari Yochanan kevat sheba osod tzaddik ad Dan tashash kocho. So Avram Avinu saw, when Avram Avinu was pursuing the kings, when he got to the area of Dan, suddenly again his strength was diminished. Why? Ra'u bnei banav shasidin la'avod avodah zara b'dan. Because he saw prophetically that his descendants would worship avodah zara in Dan. So because the Avram Avinu's spiritual strength was weakened, as soon as they got to Dan, Shneimar, they both say, now what happened in Dan? Shneimar, vayasem esa echa bebeis el, v'esa echa nasan bedan. So this is actually referring to Yeravam ben Nevat. We spoke about this last week also. Yeravam ben Nevat, the first king over the split kingdom, Yehuda Yisrael, installed two egels, right? Two golden calves. And one of them was put in the tribal area of Dan. So this is incredible. So even though this wasn't going to happen until centuries later, nevertheless, Avram Avinu's strength was diminished when he got to the future site of Avodah Zarah of his children. Va'af osa rasha lo niskaber ad she'egia ledan. So too again, Nebuchadnezzar, Avodah and also were not strengthened until they got to Dan. Shneimar midan nishma nechras susav. I'm Rabbi Zera. Afagav the shalach Rabbi Shmuel Silber. I will say, get ready for this. So this, Rabbi Zera said the following message was given by Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. Hizara b'zakin sheshachach temuda machmason. I will say, be careful with the Talmud Chacham who lost his learning because of extenuating circumstances. Or I will say, sometimes in life a person gets older, they forget their learning. Whether it's because of something like dementia or Alzheimer's, or whether again it's just part of getting old in life. Be careful with a Talmud Chacham who forgot his learning, even though he doesn't necessarily have the recall. That learning is still a part of who and what he is, and therefore there is an obligation to go ahead and respect him, which also teaches us a tremendous life lesson as well. The power that Torah has upon us is not only in the knowledge that we retain, and this is a very important source of chizuk, especially for us, Daf Yomi Chevra, because a lot of times one of the most beautiful things about Daf Yomi is you see so much in one day. One of the most difficult things about Daf Yomi is come the next day, I have absolutely no idea what I learned. Right? But so sometimes that's very frustrating for us because, what am I doing? What am I doing? We'll say, of course. Now, again, the answer to that is, you know what I'm going to say. What's the answer to that? The answer to that is chazara. Chazara. That's why a person has to chazar the daf. We know that. But we'll say, in addition to that, the real power of Torah is what it does to you as a person, what it does to your neshama, and that has nothing to do with retention. It is entirely experiential. The act of sitting and learning Torah, by definition, fundamentally changes me as a person. And even if I don't remember one word, I am still a changed human being. That's why the Gemara says, you have a Talmud Chacham, a Zaken, who forgot his learning. You think that because he can't recall it, therefore, again, the Torah impacts him any less. Chas v'shalom. He's still the same holy Jew because Torah has imprinted on his neshama and fundamentally changed him. Furthermore, v'izara b'vridin. Also be careful with the vridin. So it's an interesting halach. Remember again from the last cycle in Chulin, we learned about this. When you shecht a bird, when you shecht ophos, so there's a blood vessel that runs next to the esophagus. There's a machlokes as to whether or not that artery needs to be cut as part of shechita. Rabbi Yehuda says you should be careful to do it because that allows the animal to bleed out faster and drains the animal of blood faster. That's called the vridin. The Gemara says, "Izaba vridin Rabbi Yehuda." But I'll say, watch this. V'zara b'bnei am haaretz. Be careful with the children of ignorant people. Shemehen teitzei Torah, because from them, from the children of Amei Haaretz, ultimately, again, that's where Torah will come from. I will say, this is an astounding Gemara. Take a look at Rashi for just a moment. It's the last Rashi on the right side. He's talking about over here, children who grow up, who are children of Amei Haaretz, who are children of ignorant people. Now I will say, by the way, in this context, Am Haaretz is not used in a disparaging way. It's used in a factual way. Right? A person grows up in a home where his parents are ignorant. By the way, ignorant doesn't have to mean they're not observant. Ignorant just means they don't know Torah. They don't learn Torah per se. So Rashi says over here, and those children who grow up in a home of Amei Haaretz become Talmidei Chachamim, lasos lam kavod. Make sure to give those Talmidei Chachamim whose parents are Amei Haaretz, make sure to give them the greatest amount of kavod. Why? Shemehem teitzei Torah li Yisrael. Because those are Talmidei Chachamim who are going to create and affect the greatest change for Am Yisroel. Shaharei Yatzu Shmaya V'Avtam Neimar. So we'll see examples. So we'll say, what's the pshat? What's the pshat? That it's the children of Amei Haaretz who make the greatest impact to Klal Yisrael. Not the children who are the children whose fathers are Talmidei Chachamim, grandfathers Talmidei Chachamim. What's the pshat? Well, I think it's a very simple yesod. You know, when a person grows up in a home of Amei Haaretz and then decides to become a Talmid Chacham, they have to work 10 times harder. Sometimes they have to work against parental resistance. Certainly, again, they have to learn a whole new body of things that perhaps they did not receive growing up. The push, right, and the commitment and the resilience that those Talmidei Chachamim have, sometimes people who grew up with it don't necessarily have the same thing. And therefore, ultimately, the contribution that those Talmidei Chachamim will make, ultimately, again, is tenfold over what others do. It's an incredible idea. So the Gemara, and again, I will say, but if you notice over here, the Gemara says, Hizaru b'bnei Amei Haaretz. Be careful. Now, if you have to tell someone to be careful, what does that mean? Right? That people generally, again, are not careful with this. Right? Why? Because we'll say it's so interesting. In the Welt, in the world, it's so interesting. In the world, we put so much primacy and importance on yichus, right? This one has yichus, and this one has yichus. And yichus is wonderful. Right? Yichus is beautiful. It's fantastic. Who you come from, we all have beautiful yichus. You come from Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, the best yichus in the world. We put so much on. So Chazal telling us, good, shkayach on yichus. But just understand, it's often those who do not have the distinguished pedigree, but then decide to make something magnificent of themselves. Those are the agents of change. Those are the people, ultimately, again, who make the most dramatic and tremendous difference. The ones who society say are like, there's somebody was telling me the other day that that a certain yeshiva, really didn't have its same standing anymore. Certain yeshiva, post high school yeshiva. Why? This was the lashon. The person said, it's filled with flip outs. I'm like, what? Flip outs. So you know what lashon flip out? Flip out is someone maybe who grew up, like a little bit more modern, or maybe not, and then became much more religious. Flip out. So first of all, I said, so you mean like people like we want to emulate, right? When you say flip out, you mean like so people who started with something and then decided to get more, like that's a good. It's so warped. It's so warped that like in the world, somehow someone who started with less and then chose more. That person is a tzaddik shebit tzaddikim. Right? That person goes on a pedestal. A person who made a choice to be more, to do more, to accomplish more, even though perhaps they didn't have it growing up. Even though perhaps, again, maybe their parents did like it, don't like it, are supportive, aren't supportive, tacitly supportive, whatever it is, but they decide they want more. It's just so interesting that sometimes we have such a warped view of where actual greatness really comes from. It's very nice if you come from a family of righteous people. That's fantastic. Zachisa, incredible. But that does absolutely nothing for you except start you off at a higher place. But you still have to accomplish yourself. Are we throwing tissues over here? Did I just see that? Okay. All right. Anyway, we'll say, so that's why the Gemara has to say, Hizaru bibnei amei haaretz. Be careful with the children of amei haaretz, which means that the Welt is not. But sometimes, again, Rabbi said, the greatest people in this world are the ones who aren't born with the spiritual silver spoon in their mouth, and instead try to accomplish great things on their own and make it. Those are the people who affect change. Incredible. The Gemara says, Ki ha milsa modin alei. The Gemara says, Ki ha milsa modin alei. Tzadik ato Hashem, ki areve lecha, ach mishpatim adabra oscha, madu adarcha sham tzalecha. Shalu kol bogdei bagad, netatem gam sharsho, yelchu gam aso pri. Okay, so what's the pshat in this pasuk? So this is Eov. No, sorry, Yirmiyahu. So Yirmiyahu over here is asking, again, I will say the part of this pasuk we're going to focus on over here. The part of this pasuk we're going to focus on over here is that why is it derech Hashem salecha? Why is it that the wicked seem to go ahead and prosper? So the Gemara says like this: Mashallah Adam. Sorry. Maya hadrule. What was answered back to Yirmiyahu Navi? Ki es raglayim ratzasavi alucha ve'ech tach tischara es hasusim ba'aretz shalom ataboteach. What does this mean? Mashallah Adam Echad. Shama Yochel ani larotz gimel parasol tzavnei hasusim. So we'll say this is a mashal. Listen to this. There was a guy. The guy claimed that he could run faster than anything. He could even run faster than horses. I could run 3 parasos. We'll say parasos a lot of area. I could run 3 parsos and I could even outrun horses. Bein bitzei hamayim, right? I could even run in swamps. Obviously, much harder to run in a swamp. So what happened? Nizdamin lo ragli echad. So now he was racing against the human runner. Ragli is a runner. Ratz lefan of gimel milim biyabasha vanilla. And this human runner, outpaced him 3 milin, which is a much lesser distance, and biyabasha on dry land. So the Gemara says, Amar lei umalifnei ragli kach lifnei susim alachas kama v'kama. And we say to this guy, if you can't beat the human runner, you certainly can't outpace horses. Umash loshes milin kach kilo parasos. If you can't beat the runner for 3 milin, you certainly can't go ahead and you certainly can't outpace him for gil parsos. So the Gemara says, and if you can't outpace him on dry land, you certainly can't outpace anything on the swamp. So af ata, so to you Yirmiyahu. So we'll say, so what does this mean? What does this mean? At the end of the day, what they were telling Yirmiyahu is that you don't understand the ways of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's simply it. You think you could understand, you think that you could see, you think that you know, but at the end of the day you don't. Uma b'schar arba besuros, sheshilamti la'oso rasha, sheratz achar kvodi, ata tamiyah, keshanim. Supposed to listen to this. We're going to see this story in just a moment. So Yirmiyahu, you're bothered by the fact that I went ahead and I allow Nebuchadnezzar to be successful in such a dramatic way. But just you should see, Nebuchadnezzar got the reward of 4 psios, of 4 steps. We'll see the story of those 4 steps in just a little bit. So if you see all of the reward that Nebuchadnezzar got for taking 4 steps, then ultimately, again, you're going to be overwhelmed. when I reward Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Shiratzu lefanai kisusim alachas kama v'kama. So Nebuchadnezzar took 4 steps and was rewarded. You'll be overwhelmed when you see the reward ultimately of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, who ran before me like horses. Again, we'll see that story in just a little bit. So the Gemara says, Dichsev u'leviim nishbar libi b'kerbi dachfu. Kalas mos hayisik yishikar okegibar avru yain mei Hashem umei divrei kadsho. Incredible. Hanidal psios mahi. By the way, what do you mean? When did Nebuchadnezzar walk before HaKadosh Baruch Hu with 4 steps? What's that story? Dichsiv, here, both says incredible story. Dichsiv ba'isahi shalach merudach beladon ben beladon melech bavel svarim. So what happened, that merudach beladon, that was his name, ben beladon, son of Baladon, right, who was the king of Babel, sent a letter. Now the rest of the pasuk is, he sent a letter to Chizkiyahu because he heard that Chizkiyahu was ill and then he was healed. Okay, so the Gemara says, I understand. Mishum ki chal Chizkiyahu vayechazek shadal svarim umincha. So the Gemara says, so I understand, because Chizkiyahu got sick, so this king, the king of Babel, Merodach Baladon, sent a letter and to give to Chizkiyahu. And I was, what's going on over here? To which the Gemara says, in lidrosh es mofes haya. So the Gemara says, yes, because Baladon Merodach, or Merodach Baladon, was very interested because he saw that when Chizkiyahu was healed, a miracle occurred. He was overwhelmed by this miracle, and he said, I got to find out about this guy Chizkiyahu. What's his story? What was the miracle? Listen to this. Rabbi Yochanan, Osayom Shemes Bo Achaz. By the way, I apologize. I know we're going quickly at some point. It's also so much. Actually, Menachem Mendel said a very good idea that maybe Shavuos night this year, we're going to do Perak HaChelek. That's going to be our topic for this year. Mam is just like identify some of these incredible stories and just go through them. I think it's a worthy endeavor. So what happened? The day that Achaz died. Who was Achaz? Achaz was the father of Chizkiyahu. Achaz was a tremendous rasha. On the day that Achaz died, Shtei Sha'os Chaya. HaKadosh Baruch Hu shortened the day dramatically, caused the sun to set after 2 hours. Now, why did he do that? He did not want Achaz to be eulogized, and he did not want Achaz to be buried properly. So he dramatically went ahead and caused the sun to set prematurely. So what happened? So the Gemara says, and this is incredible. When Chizkiyahu was healed, so ultimately, again, HaKadosh Baruch Hu returned those 10 extra hours. So that's how beautiful this is. On the day that Chizkiyahu was healed, there were 10 extra hours of daylight in that day. Isn't that incredible? So the day was prolonged by 10 hours because he was healed. Obviously, again, the day was prolonged by everyone. So Baladon Merodach, and I keep getting his name wrong, Merodach Baladon ultimately saw this 10 extra daylight hours. Like, what's going on over here? So the Gemara says, so Lahanach as Hashani he laid Chsiv Hinni Meshiv es Tzel Hamalos Asher Yarda B'Malos Achaz V'Shemesh Achronis Es Malos Adeshiv Hashemesh Es Hamalos B'Malos Asher Yarda. Amalei Mai Hai. So Merodach Baladon said, what is this? Amalei Chizkiyahu Chalash V'Itbach. So they told him Chizkiyahu was ill, he became healed, and Baruch Hashem, the Yosef gave him back 10 hours of daylight. Alright, so the Gemara says, Amar Ika Gavra Ki Hai V'Lo Ba'inu L'Shaduri Le'Shalma. So this is incredible. So Merodach Baladon said, listen, if there is a man like this who gets 10 extra hours of daylight from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, how can I not write him a letter and say a Shalom Aleichem? Right? You got to get to know a man like this. So the Gemara says, Kasvili, listen to this. So here is the letter that Merodach Baladon sent to Chizkiyahu. Here it is. The Gemara says, Kasvili, Shalom Malamalka Chizkiyahu. Peace be unto you, King Chizkiyahu. Shalom lekarta Yerushalayim. Right? Peace unto Yerushalayim. Shalom le'elokar Rabbo. Peace unto the great God. Peace unto the great God. Incredible. So the Gemara says, so what happened? Nebuchadnezzar safrei di Baladon hava. So Nebuchadnezzar, now remember, I will say this, when Nebuchadnezzar was young, so what was his job? He was the scribe of the king. He was the scribe of Merodach Baladon. So the Gemara says, listen to this. So apparently Nebuchadnezzar wasn't there when Merodach Baladon wrote this letter. He was on break, So, he comes back, he finds out that Merodach Baladon wrote this letter. Tell me, what was the letter that was written? They told him the letter. So Nebuchadnezzar says something amazing. Nebuchadnezzar says the letter makes no sense. He says, you call the God of the Jews great, but you put him last. Right? You say, Shalom Aleichem, great King Chizkiyahu. Shalom Aleichem, great city of Yerushalayim. Shalom Aleichem, great God. And the Nebuchadnezzar says, it doesn't make any sense. If God is great, then where does he belong? All the way in front. I was saying, but it's Nebuchadnezzar. It's Nebuchadnezzar. Shalom So Nebuchadnezzar says, how are you supposed to write it? Shalom Aleichem to great God, Shalom Aleichem to Chizkiah, Shalom Aleichem to Yerushalayim. So I'll say, so you're right, can you imagine? Everybody has one of these moments. Nebuchadnezzar is like, guys, I left for 5 minutes. Right? And you can't get the letter right. So what happens? They said to him, Kraina digarta, so you've seen this expression before, that literally again, Kraina digarta literally means he who reads the letter should be the one who goes ahead and delivers it. The idea being that sometimes if you have the good idea, execute. You have the good idea, execute. Don't come, basket full of good ideas. You have good ideas, execute them as well. So Nebuchadnezzar, the letter is in transit. You think that it should be redone? Okay, go after the courier and get it. So we'll say, listen to this. Rabbi says, so we'll say, listen to this. To his credit, Nebuchadnezzar runs after the courier. Roit Basrei, Kediroit Arba Psios, as he took 4 steps, Asa Gavriel Va'okme. Gavriel stopped him. So I'm Rabbi Yochanan, Ilmale lo ba Gavriel v'amidu lo haya takana l'sanem she'Yisrael. Rabbi say, listen to this. In this, because what was Nebuchadnezzar doing? Nebuchadnezzar was running after the courier because Nebuchadnezzar was concerned about the kavod of the Ribono Shel Olam. Gavriel stopped him because had Nebuchadnezzar run any further, there would have been no way to stop his future carnage against Klal Yisrael. So I will say that's what we saw before in the zechus of the Arba Psios, the 4 steps of Nebuchadnezzar running after the courier because he thought the letter was not written in a dignified enough way to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That gave Nebuchadnezzar ultimately again tremendous power over Klal Yisrael. And had the Malach Gavriel not stopped him where he was, who knows chas v'shalom what the carnage would have been. We'll say absolutely amazing. We'll say I just point out over something amazing. Sometimes it's always interesting to see what makes great people great. How do overwhelmingly successful people become successful? So the Gemara tells a lot of these stories so that there's something to be learned. So what do you see in this story over here from Nebuchadnezzar? So I will say, just on a most basic level, a willingness to take an idea and to implement it. A lot of times in life, we're chock full of ideas, and it's great. And I'm willing to take all of my ideas, I'll alphabetize them, categorize them, anything you want, and then I'm ready to give them over to someone else. And then as long as someone else does the execution. What makes great people great is they have beautiful ideas and they are willing to put in the effort to implement. They don't delegate. They do what has to get done in order to get the job done. And Nebuchadnezzar has this insight. It's not like, okay, Chevra, who wants to run after the courier? Again, if he's the sofer to the king, by the way, that's a pretty important position. He could have gotten someone else to run after the courier, but instead he decides to do it himself. Because great people recognize that if you believe in something enough, roll up your sleeves and get it done. Don't wait for someone else to do the heavy lifting. Do the job yourself. Incredible. The Gemara goes right there. By the way, my Baladon ben Baladon. So the Gemara goes back over here to this king. I just want to point out over here, this king is the king of Bavel before Nebuchadnezzar. So his name was Merodach Baladon ben Baladon. What's the pshat? That's a pretty strange name. What does it mean, Baladon ben Baladon? Listen to this. We'll say, Amri, Baladon Malkahava. Baladon was his father. Baladon, the father, was king. What happened? Ve'eshtani ape v'havi ki kalba. And apparently he had some type of illness. His face looked like a dog. Transformed into a dog, right? Again, I know the dog caucus is going to say, oh, but they're so cute, so beautiful, so wonderful. Great, okay, good. You clearly see how Chazal feel about dogs. Okay, good. So anyway, so the Gemara says over here, he looked like a dog. So his face became deformed. He can't be king, at least the Bavel, he can't become king with a deformed face. So he abdicated the throne. So his son Merodach becomes king. So the idea is actually very beautiful. So his son Baladon becomes king, but part of the way that his son gave his father kavod is he took his father's name as his own. So instead of just being Merodach ben Baladon, he became Merodach Baladon ben Baladan. This was covered to his father who was still alive. So the Gemara says, "Hainu dichsiv ben yechabedav ve'eved adonov." So we'll say this is what it means when it says a son will honor a father and a servant his master. Ben yechabedav hada amar. So we'll say, by the way, it's actually pretty striking. It's just interesting to see that the example that Chazal want to bring on this pasuk of ben yechabedav, which is from Malachi, the Gemara quotes it. The example it gives ultimately again is Merodach Baladan ben Baladan. A lot of other examples of kibbut aveim, but it's interesting to see that they choose this one. The Gemara says, "Eved Adonov." What's the Eved Adonov? Dichsiv u'bechodesh hachamishi be'Yisrael lachodesh yishnas sha'asei shana lemelech Nebuchadnezzar ba melech Bavel ba Nebuchadnezzar and Ravat Tabachim Amar lifnei melech Bavel b'Yerushalayim ve'Yisrov as beis Hashem as beis Hamelech. So we'll say, listen to this. So the example, who is the example of the servant who revered his master? The servant who revered his master was Nebuchadnezzar. Now we're transitioning back. Remember again, just so you get where Nebuchadnezzar is the king of Bavel. Nebuchadnezzar was his top general. Now Nebuchadnezzar was a cruel and bloodthirsty man. He's given the appellation Rav HaTavachim, the chief butcher. The chief butcher. In fact, we speak about Nebuchadnezzar in the Kinos and Tisha B'Av, and they speak specifically about Nebuchadnezzar's bloodthirst for children, the cruelty that he exhibited towards children. So the Gemara says over here, so the Gemara quotes the pasuk that says that Nebuchadnezzar goes ahead, he burns the house of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the palace of the king. Now the pasuk said that Nebuchadnezzar was standing before Nebuchadnezzar, his master. The Gemara says, Am Yisroel. So now let's just get the geography right over here. Nebuchadnezzar is in Yerushalayim because he's just destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. He's destroyed ultimately again the palace of the king. But it says that he's standing before Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Bavel. But Nebuchadnezzar was never in Yerushalayim. The Gemara says, Nebuchadnezzar was Nebuchadnezzar ever in Yerushalayim? V'aksiv, Vayalu also Melech Bavel, Rivlasa. So Nebuchadnezzar was never in Eretz Yisrael. He was in Antiochia, right? That's where he was. So how does it say that Nebuchadnezzar stood before Nebuchadnezzar? We'll say it's Tzaddik on base 96b, 3 lines down. Rav Chisar Yitzchak Baradimi Chadamar the Musti Yokno Haisa Chakukola Amar Kafto. That Nebuchadnezzar had such covet for his king that he had an image of Nebuchadnezzar literally engraved on his chariot. So he felt like he was always before his king. Or the other opinion says he had so much reverence for Nebuchadnezzar, so much reverence that it was as if he was standing before the king at all times. Incredible. So the Gemara says, Rava says as follows. So we'll say, now we're jumping back a little bit. So the initial attack on Yerushalayim. So the Gemara says, Toin Tzlas Mea Kundaisa Narga, the Parzala, the Shal Parzala. So Nebuchadnezzar had sent to Nebuchadnezzar wagon loads of 300 of the sharpest axes that were so sharp that the metal could cut through metal. All right, the Shal Parzala, Shadlei Nebuchadnezzar Nebuchadnezzar, Kulan Banasinu Chad Adash Yerushalayim. And all the axes broke, trying to break down one gateway of Yerushalayim. Shneimar, Pisuchai Yacha B'Kshil, Uchayalafos Yalamon. So fine. Boy Lemehadar. Amar Mistafina Deloli Avdu Bi Kihechi Da Avdu B'Sancherev. So we'll say, listen to this. Nebuchadnezzar is ready to turn back. Ready to turn back. Now why is Nebuchadnezzar ready to turn back? Because remember again, it wasn't so long beforehand that what happened? Sancherev, right? So in other words, everybody knows the story of Sancherev, the massive defeat at hands of HaKodesh Baruch Hu. So now you have 300 of the sharpest axes, metal that could cut through metal, and all of them break on one doorway of Yerushalayim. This does not look like a good omen. So Nebuchadnezzar is ready to turn around, go back home. Nafka kala va'amar, shavar bar shavar. So Baskol came out. Incredible. Baskol came shavar. Now both sides, shavar bar shavar literally means a jumper. Someone who jumps. Rashi says over here, Shavar bar Shavar is on the right-hand column of Rashi, about 10 lines into the short lines. Doleg bar Doleg, Kum v'kava shel Yerushalayim. Nebuchadnezzar and Kalmar. So I'll say, so this is interesting. So apparently the Gemara says, that he called him the jumper, because interestingly enough, Nebuchadnezzar was part of Sancherev's campaign as well. And interestingly enough, remember again, what was Sancherev's mistake? What was Sancherev's mistake? He missed the window. So apparently, Nebuchadnezzar was the one who was urging Sancherev, attack now. That's why he's called the jumper, right? He was ready to leap into battle, to jump into battle. So the Baskol comes up and says, jumper, Don't abandon your plan over here. So the Gemara says, Shavar bar Shavar, Nevuzaran Shavar demata zimna demikdash chariv vehechala mikle. So ultimately, again, it is time for the Beis Hamikdash to be destroyed. I will say, by the way, I just want to point out that these Gemaras are very profound, because a lot of times when we suffer misfortune at the hands of the nations of the world, what compounds our pain is the notion of a feeling of abandonment by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, what's interesting to say is, Chazal always tell us, nothing ever happens to us unless the Ribono Shel Olam wants it to happen. And even when there's pain, and even when there's suffering, and even when there's loss, that only comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, on one hand, it's painful, because why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu do this to us? On the other hand, there is, interestingly enough, or ironically enough, a certain element of nechama. Because I know it's not something that someone else is doing to me, it's something that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is doing to me. Which means that the Rebbe Shalom is choreographing even this overwhelmingly painful situation, which is difficult as it is, but I know it's not haphazard, I know it's not random, I know it's coming from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the Baskal comes out and says, Nevuzaran, don't abandon ship, it is time for the Beis Hamikdash to be destroyed. So watch this. Pashle Chad Narga, there was one axe left. One axe left. Asya Maki Bekufe V'iftach. So I will say, so now there's one axe left. So now, this is interesting. Nevuzaran is a very smart man. So Nevuzaran realizes now that he's at a very, very dangerous crossroads. Am I going to be like Sanhedrin and be wiped out by Hashem, or am I going to be the agent of Hashem? So what does he do? He takes the last axe. He goes over to the gate of Yerushalayim. He doesn't hit the gate. He doesn't hit the gate with the sharp part. He hits the gate with the handle, the blunt, the dull part. Why? What's his logic? His logic is like this. If the Moshe wants him to destroy the Beis Hamikdash, the gate will open even with the blunt part. So the Gemara says, and sure enough, the iftach. He knocked against the gate with the dull part, and the gate fell down. Shinemar Yodea Kemevi Lamayla Besvach Is Kardumos Havakatel Va'azu Adamata Leichle. Shavuot says, so now, this is a tragically overwhelming story. The Uzzar Ravat Habachim, the chief butcher, knocks down the gate of Yerushalayim, and is literally again killing everyone in sight until he gets to the Beis Hamikdash. Adlik Bei Nura. He sets the Beis Hamikdash on fire. We'll say this is an overwhelming Gemara. Gava Heichale. As Nevuzaran lights the Beis Hamikdash on fire, the Beis Hamikdash itself begins to ascend heavenward, almost as if the Beis Hamikdash is trying to save itself from what is occurring. Can you imagine this? The Beis Hamikdash uproots itself and begins to go ahead and literally ascend heavenward. And what happened? Darku Bei Min Shemaya. The Ribono Shel Olam pushed it back down. The Beis Hamikdash itself is trying to escape. The Beis Hamikdash itself is trying to say, you know what, sometimes even the Beis Hamikdash sees all the pain and all the suffering and all the hostages and everything that happens in this world. And the Beis Hamikdash just wants to remove itself from this. So the Beis Hamikdash doesn't want to be. The Beis Hamikdash says, enough. And the Shekhinah says, there's a plan. Whatever the plan is, there's a plan. So the Shekhinah itself takes its hand and literally pushes the Beis Hamikdash back down. Overwhelming. Shnei Amar, Gat Darach Hashem the besuros pas Yehuda. Kazei Chadaite. So one can imagine at this point in time, Nevuzaran is feeling shtickle bal gaiva, right? A little bit arrogant. After all, again, he's met with ridiculous success, right? Burning down the house of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Nafka baska va'amra le amakatila katlas heichela kalya kalyas kimcha tachina tachinas. Nevuzaran, calm down. You killed a dead nation. You destroyed a destroyed building. Literally, again, you ground up wheat that was already flour. In other words, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was telling Nevuzaran is, you didn't do anything. I did this. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I did this. You're carrying out my will. Don't think for a moment that this is your success, right? That this is your accomplishment. Everything that you're doing is only occurring because I'm allowing it to occur. Shnei Amar, Kechira Echayim V'tach Nikemach, Gali Tamasech, Techash V'Shuva, Gali Shok Avrinaros, Chitim Lo Ne'amar Elekemach. It doesn't say anything about wheat, rather it says again, flour. The same way that if you come and you grind flour, that's already flour, you're not doing anything. So you've destroyed people, you've destroyed a destroyed building. That's an incredible story here. Chaza Dami de Zechariah Davi Karasach. Okay, so we'll say, so the Navi Zechariah. This is a tragic story. So many tragic stories. It's overwhelming. So the Klal Yisrael, Navi Zechariah, had given Musar to Klal Yisrael saying that they have to do tshuva or they're going to be destroyed. How did Klal Yisrael deal with this message? They killed Zechariah. Now they killed Zechariah in the Beis HaMikdash itself. So what happens? So Nebuchadnezzar is standing in the Beis HaMikdash, and he sees Chazar Dami de Zechariah de Kaveh Harasach. He sees that there's blood that's boiling, literally bubbling blood in the Beis HaMikdash. Amar Lahu my high. So Zechariah says to the people, the Jews in the Beis HaMikdash, what is this? Amar Le Dam Zvachimu Dishtapich. I say, don't worry about that. That's just sacrificial blood that spilled. Amar Lahu, so Nebuchadnezzar says that doesn't make any sense. So what does he do? Amar Lahu, I see va'ansi imidamukasi v'lo idmu. So ultimately, what Nebuchadnezzar does, he shechts an animal, takes the blood from a shechted animal, compares it to this blood that's boiling basically. He says, it doesn't look like the same kind of blood. Doesn't look like the same kind of blood. I think you're lying to me. He says, Amar Lahu Galili v'lo sarikna lebisaraychu b'misrikei deparzla. So Nebuchadnezzar says, either tell me what this is, or literally, again, I will peel the skin off your body with iron combs. So Amrulay, HaKohen v'navihu. This is the blood of a man who was both a Kohen and a Navi. The invi lehu liyisah b'chorna d'Yushalayim v'katluhu, who prophesied for the Jewish people about the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, and the Klal Yisrael, we killed him. We killed him because we didn't like his message. Amar lehu, anim ifaisin alei. So Nebuchadnezzar says, okay, I will appease Chizkiyo. I'll appease him. I see Rabbanon, Kadel Iluya Valonach. In other words, I'll avenge Chizkiyahu's blood, Zechariah's blood. So what does he do? He gathers up the Rabbanim, the rabbinic leadership. He kills them all, but the blood didn't stop bubbling. Aisu Dardiki Debeirav. He brought the school children. Kadel Iluya. He slaughtered them. Valonach, and the blood did not stop. I see Pirchei Kahuna Katel. He brought the young Kohanim. Killed them, and the blood did not stop bubbling. So the Gemara says, Ad dekatil iluya tishin va'arberivo, until he slaughtered 940,000 people. Velo nach, and ultimately again the blood did not stop bubbling. Karev legabe. So Nebuchadnezzar goes over to the blood and he says, Zechariah, tovim shebahem ibaritem. So it's overwhelming Gemara. So Nebuchadnezzar says, Zechariah. Literally, again, I've slaughtered the best of Klal Yisrael. Should I kill more? Miyad nach. In that moment again, so the blood of Zechariah stopped bubbling. And say, it's such a overwhelming. You should just know, by historical accounts, it's interesting to note that close to 1 million Jews were slaughtered when the Beis HaMikdash fell, when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. So it's interesting. A lot of times, like Gemara, sometimes numbers are hyperbolic. It's interesting. The 940,000 number is, again, close to 1 million people fell. That's why when we think about destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, we have to think about just the destruction of the structure. But we forget about just the colossal loss of life, over almost 1 million people. So the Gemara says, so now so literally, Nebuchadnezzar says, Zechariah, what else do you want? I killed the Rabbanim. I killed the children. I killed the Pirchei Kahuna. I killed the best of Klal Yisrael. You want more? You want more blood? You want more bloodshed? And then the blood stopped bubbling. So we'll say, the Gemara says, well, stop here in just a moment. The Gemara says, here, tshuva b'daite. So in this moment, Rabbi says something amazing happened, which is, so Nebuchadnezzar says, as they say, like, mashu lo normali, right? This is not normal. This is not a normal zach over here, right? And he has thoughts of tshuva. Why does he have thoughts of tshuva? He says, Mahem shelo ibdu ela nefesh achos, kach hu gavra mat tehevi alei. So Nebuchadnezzar says like this, Klal Yisrael was held to such a degree of accountability because they killed one person, they killed Zechariah. So Nebuchadnezzar says, what's going to happen to me? I killed almost 1 million people. What's going to be with me? Arak shader protisa lebese vaisgayer. Crazy. Nebuchadnezzar sends a letter to his house saying, Chevra, I'm not coming home. And he goes off and he converts. So I will say an absolutely overwhelming Gemara. So even Nebuchadnezzar, and again, Ravat Habochim, the chief butcher, says this overwhelming moment of hear her tshuva. I just want to point out over here, the lashon over here is hear her b'tshuva. You know, the lashon of the Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva. Okay, well, I'll just tell you this very quickly. The lashon of Hilchos Tshuva, Parak Aleph Halacha Aleph, is Kishiyasa Tshuva Kishiyasa tshuva, chayav leizvados. So it's interesting that what does it mean kishiyasa tshuva? What is that lashon kishiyasa tshuva? Rav Gifter, tells Rosh Shiva, has a beautiful sefer called Hirurei Tshuva. Rav Gifter writes, Rabbi Soloveitchik has a similar idea as well, that the first step of tshuva is hirur tshuva. What's hirur? Hirur is a thought. Before you even do anything concrete, before I change anything about my life, the first step in tshuva is that thought. What's that thought? That thought is, I can't go on the way things are. The first step in tshuva is this level of cognition where I say to myself, I gotta change. Things just have to be different. How, what, when, where, that remains to be seen. But I know that the way things are now should not be the way they go forward. Nivud Zaran has that moment of hearing, right? As he's standing there with blood of precious Jews on his hands, standing in a Beis HaMikdash that is going up in flames, has this cathartic moment of hearing, says, you know what? I don't even know what I'm going to do, but I know that I can't continue in this way. Runs away from everything, gives up everything, and goes on to become a ger, goes on to become a member of Klal Yisrael. I will say, the story's not over, but we're going to stop here for today. The rest of Nivud Zaran's story, and the story of other great game in tomorrow's daf, what a start to the Gavosai, Shkoyach.